Honen's childhood. Honen's birth. Honen Shonen was born in the village of Inaoka in the southern part of the township of Kume in the province of Mimasaka. Tokikuni Uruma, his father, was the military chief, or Yoshi, for the township, and his mother's maiden name was Hada. Being childless in their grief, they prayed to the Buddha and to the gods for a child, and Hada had a dream in which she thought she swallowed a razor. Forthwith, she found herself enceinte. Tokikuni, overjoyed, said to his wife, "The child in your womb will doubtless be a boy, and he is destined to become a teacher of the emperor." Hada was a woman of gentle spirit, and during the whole period of pregnancy was quite free from pain. She strictly abstained from wine, meat, and the 5 prohibited vegetables, ever regarding the 3 sacred treasures with deep reverence. Mysterious omens. At length, on the 7th day of the 4th month, in the 2nd year of Chojo, May 20th, 1133, in the reign of the Emperor Sutoko, she gave painless birth to a son, precisely at the hour of the horse, 12 a.m., where a purple cloud appeared in the sky and 2 white banners alighted upon the profuse branches of a double-trunked muku tree, which stood on the west side of the house within the garden enclosure, where little bells hanging from the banners tinkled out their joyous notes to the sky. The luster of their patterns shone brightly in the sunbeams. After 7 days, to the amazement of all who had seen and heard, they ascended and disappeared. Thenceforth, this tree was called the 2-bannered muku tree, and though long afterwards it fell to the ground, sweet odors and other miraculous tokens did not cease. This was why the people regarded the place with reverence, and built here a temple, which they called Tanjoji, the birth temple, with a special chapel enshrining the image of Honen, where they practiced the Nembutsu. It is related that at the time of the birth of the Emperor Ojin, 4 pairs of banners came down from the sky, showing, it is believed, his perfect assimilation of the Noble Eightfold Path. And now the phenomena attending Honen's birth recalled this ancient wonder as charged with some significant meaning. Honen's birth. His childhood name. The newborn child was named Seshi Maru, from the age when he used to play horse with a bamboo stick. His manners were more like those of a grown-up than of a child, such, for instance, as his habit of sitting with his face toward the west, where the pure land of Amida lies, and his behavior during youth seemed to have resembled that of Tendai Daishi. His family history. If we inquire into his family history, the following facts appear. Toshi Minamoto, also called Shiki Butaru, was descended from Hikaru Nishi Sanjo, one of the highest officials of the Supreme Council of State Udaijin, and the 17 sons of the Emperor Nimio. This Toshi murdered an official of the Imperial Archives, Kurudo, called Kanetaka, at the Yomi gate of the palace. For this offense, he was banished to the province of Mimasaka, where he married a daughter of Motokuni Uruma, the military chief of the township of Kume, and a son who was born to them. Now, as Motokuni had no male heir, he adopted this boy and changed his name from Minamoto to Uruma with the given name of Moriyuki. This Moriyuki had a son called Shigetoshi, and the latter had a son called Kunihiro, who in turn had a son by the name of Tokikuni. Tokikuni's fate. This Tokikuni, being somewhat proud of his noble ancestry, was inclined to look down upon the headman of a Naoko, known as Musha Sara Akira, Akashi no Genai, and natural did he not only fail to pay him proper respect, but became negligent of his official duties. Tokikuni even declined to meet Sada Akira when he wished to see him. The latter deeply resented such discourtesy, and one night in the spring of the 7th year of Honen, 1141, made an attempt upon Tokikuni's life. Sesshimaru, who was only 9 years old at the time, escaped from his bedroom and hid himself somewhere about the house. Peeping through a small aperture, he observed Sada Akira in the garden feathering an arrow, whereupon young Sesshimaru, taking careful aim with his little arrow, struck the man right between the eyes. The resulting wound was in such a prominent place that it could not be concealed, and there was danger of suspicion being directed towards Sada Akira for the wound he had inflicted upon the boy's father. So, fearing that the relatives of Tokikuni might take revenge upon him, he ran away at lightning speed and was never seen in the place again. Thus it came about that the boy was called Little Arrow Boy, Koyago, and people were never tired talking of his exploits. Tokikuni's dying request. Tokikuni's wound proved incurable, and as he drew near to the gates of death, he turned to his 9-year-old boy and said, "Don't let this rankle in your breast and lead you to avenge my enemy, as was done in the well-known case of the humiliation on Mount Koichi. This misfortune was the result of some sin of mine in a former state of existence. If you harbor ill will towards your enemy, you will never be free from enemies. So don't do it, my boy, but without delay forsake the worldly life and become a priest. Then pray that I may attain Buddhahood, and seek earnestly too for your own salvation." Thus saying, he sat erect with his face to the west, folded his hands in prayer to the Buddha, and as if falling asleep, breathed his last. Honen's childhood. Honen's boyhood. Kwangaku Tokuga. Now in this province, there was a cloister known as Bodaiji, the abbot of which was Kwangaku, a priest who bore the honorable title of Tokuga, religious lecturer. As he was Hada's younger brother, he was the uncle of Sesshimaru, who, in harmony with his father's dying request, had been put under Kwangaku's care. The boy's natural aptitude for study was as quick as the swiftly flowing mountain stream. If you told him one thing, he understood 10. If you told him one thing, he understood 10. He never forgot anything he was told. The country no place for such a boy. As Kwangaku saw that the boy's talents were unusual, he thought it was too bad for such a genius to waste his time covered up in the dust of an out-of-the-way countryside, and so, as was most fitting, he began to make preparations for sending him up to the cloudland of Hei, the sacred mount of Tendai. As soon as the boy heard of his uncle's intention, he had no more heart for remaining in his native place, but thought only of hastening to the capital. His parting words to his mother. Kwangaku gladly went with him to his mother to talk the matter over, when the boy spoke to her in the following strain. "After many painful transmigrations, I have at length attained the glory of being born a man. In a world of illusion, I have at length come face to face with the teaching of the Buddha, which dispels it all. When one comes to see before one's very eyes the utter changelessness of all things, he cannot but reject the bloom-like glory of the visionary world. Above all, my father's parting words keep ringing in my ears, and I cannot forget them, and so I must at once proceed up Mount Shimei, and enter upon the study of the one only vehicle. Of course, mother, as long as you live, I shall fulfill my filial duty to you morning and evening to the utmost. But as one of the sutras says, The best way for her children to show their gratitude to their parents is by turning away from the temporal and devoting themselves to the eternal. Let not therefore your sorrow over a morning goodbye cast its gloom over the whole day. With many such words did he comfort his mother's heart. Honen and the regent Tadamichi on the Toba road to Kyoto. The mother's tears of grief. She was so thoroughly convinced of the reasonableness of all he said that she gave consent to his request, and yet she was so overwhelmed with grief that the tears ran down her sleeve upon the boy's raven locks. It was hard for her, as it always is for flesh and blood, to bear up under such sorrows, and so easy to yield to the feelings of nature which are bound to arise at a time of separation from loved ones. Her grief found expression in the following memorable lines. Alas for me, what shall I do when I must even part with this my boy, his father's one last gift to cheer my heart? The letter of introduction. But in spite of all her heart protests, she sent the boy by Kwangaku to a priest called Jihobo Genko, who was living in the northern part of the western section of the 3 groups of temples on Mount Hei. In his letter of introduction to Genko, Kwangaku said, I send you herewith an image of the great and revered Monju, by which he meant to indicate the boy's extraordinary ability. The boy meets the regent Tadamichi, thus in his 15th year, like one who leaves behind him the dense mists of the work-a-day world and ascends into the beautiful cloudland. The boy bids farewell to his country home and comes up to the capital on the 13th day of the 2nd month of the 3rd year of Kyuan, 1147, in the reign of the Emperor Kono. As he was passing along the Toba road to Kyoto, he met the regent Tadamichi Fujiwara of the Hoji temple. Dismounting from his horse, he made obeisance, when the regent ordered his carriage to be stopped and asked who that person was. A priest accompanying the boy who told who he was. Whereupon the regent courteously saluted him and passed on. At this his attendants were quite surprised, but later he said to them, the boy we met by the way had a peculiar light in his eyes, and I am sure he is of no common mold. That is why I saluted him. And when we come to think of it, may not the fact that his son Kanezi of Tsukinawa became an earnest believer in Honen have been due to the deep impression left on his mind by hearing this story from his father? It is indeed quite possible. His studies on Mount Hei. 3. His ascent of the mountain. On the boy's arrival at the capital, he sent a messenger with the letter from his uncle Jihobo Genko, who on reading it asked where the image of Monju was. When the messenger told him that it was only a boy who had come up to the capital, Genko at once knew that the boy must be very clever and sent for him. So he came up Mount Hei on the 15th day of the 2nd month in the same year. He studied Honen climbing Mount Hei. He studies the Shikyogi under Genko. Leaving the charming capital, he climbed the steep and arduous path up the mountainside and entered the study of Jihobo, who, to test the boy's ability, first of all began to teach him the Shikyogi on the 4 doctrines of Tendai. The boy soon called attention to the hard passages and began asking questions about them. The fact was that these were the very points on which from ancient times the scholars of the perfect religion, Tendai, had been in doubt and had often controverted. Genko said to himself, "This is no common boy." The boy becomes a disciple of Kohen. As the boy was so much above the ordinary in natural talents, and his fame spread, Genko thought himself entirely too dull and ignorant to be his teacher, and declared that the boy must study the profound principles of the perfect religion under the direction of a competent scholar. So on the 8th day of the 4th month in the 3rd year of Kuon, 1147, he took him to become a disciple of Kohen, who was the head priest of the Kudokuin temple on Mount A. Kohen, a disciple of Hokyo Shokaku in Sugui, and a man of no small prominence at the time, was regarded as one of the most distinguished men on Mount Hay. Kohen was much surprised on hearing of the boy's extreme cleverness, and in his delight said, "Last night in a dream I saw the full moon coming into my room. It was surely a token that I was soon to meet one worthy of becoming a teacher of the law." His ordination to the priesthood. On the 8th day of the 11th month of that same year, his beautiful locks were shaven off, and he donned the vestments of the law. The ceremony of receiving the commandments of the greater vehicle was performed in the Kaidan Hall. His early desire for the life of retirement. One day he said to his teacher Kohen, "I have already become a priest, but I want truly to retire from the world into the solitude of the forest." In reply, Kohen advised him as follows: "It is all right for you thus to wish for seclusion from the world, but before carrying out your purpose, you should first read the 60 volumes. "The reason," said the boy, "why I make this request to become a hermit is that I may abandon all hope of worldly fame or profit, and pursue the study of and practical discipline of the law of Buddha, free from all distraction, recognizing, however, the propriety of his teacher's counsel." He began the reading of these books in the spring of his 16th year, and after 3 years he had read through the whole of the 3 divisions of the 60 volumes of the Tendai Scriptures. Honen's tonsure. The young priest's profound insight. Being naturally endowed with an excellent understanding, the order and succession of the 4 doctrines and the 5 periods stood out in his mind, with all the clearness of objects reflected from a bright mirror, and the profound truth of the so-called 3 aspects in the one consciousness shone within him like a jewel, so that in his explanations he could all but surpass his teachers. Kohen, in his growing admiration for the youth, kept encouraging him to devote himself more and more diligently to the study of the way, telling him he ought yet to attain the rank of high priest. But he, on his part, never uttered a syllable to show that he had any such ambitions, but rather turned away from studies which might promote his worldly advancement, and hastened to get away from a teacher who would instill such thoughts into his mind. So on the 12th of the 9th month, in the 6th year of the Kwaian, 1150, in his 18th year, he left Kohen and entered the fold of Jigembo Eiko at Kurodani, in the western section of the mountain. He told Iko that from the time he was a child to manhood, he never could forget his father's dying counsel, and that what deepened his resolve to give himself up forever to a life of retirement from the world. Iko was so delighted to find one so young utterly devoted to the pious life that he said he was one of nature's saints, and gave him the nickname of Honembo, nature's own priest. But his real name he made up of the first character in Genko's name and the second in Iku's his own, and so called him Genku. The Kurodani temple, where once stood Honen's hermitage. Honen, the admiration of scholars. His grasp of the scriptures. From the time of his entering the monastery at Kurodani, he gave up all thought of worldly promotion, and applied his mind with all diligence to the seeking of salvation. And so, with the object of securing entire relief in the present life from the fated transmigration, he read through all the sutras and commentaries of the Tendai and other sects many times, hoping to find in some of them what he sought. So subtle were his natural powers that he was able to penetrate with apparently little effort into the meaning and reason of them all. Admiration of scholars. Honen was a man of such ready understanding that he thoroughly grasped the meaning of a work, however voluminous it was. He delved into the secret meaning of the doctrines of Buddhism, familiarizing himself with the general principles of the 8 sects, so that when he would meet an eminent scholar of any of the sects, he was always ready with his own exposition of their tenets, and he invariably won from them all their assent to his interpretations, together with words of high commendation for his acumen. Honen's discussion with Eiku on the essence of the precepts. One day, in his study of the original teachings of Tendai Dashi, the founder of the Tendai sect in China, the question arose as to what was the essence of the precepts in the perfect doctrine of the absolute reality. Jigenbo maintained that everything depended upon the man's conscious soul activity, whereas Honen insisted that it was rather the operation upon his soul of that mysterious something which inevitably comes upon one in the ceremonial act of receiving the precepts. Their discussion went on for several hours, neither of them willing to yield to the other, till at last Jigenbo became so angry that he struck Honen with a wooden pillow. At this, Honen left the room. After Jigenbo had reflected on the matter for some minutes, he went to Honen's room and acknowledged that what Honen had said expressed the ultimate meaning of Tendai's Daishin, teaching on the perfect precept of the one reality. Thus we see that selfishness has no place in Buddhism, for Honen became the teacher, and his teacher turned pupil. Honen in a temple at Saga. An earnest seeker of salvation. In the first year of Hogen, 1156, in his 24th year, he said goodbye to Iku and went to the Shoryoji temple at Saga, where he spent 7 days in earnest prayer to the Buddha, that he might be shown the true way to salvation. The image of Buddha in this temple was one which had been brought originally from India to China and thence to Japan, and was one of the most wonderful images in all 3 countries. It was not, therefore, without good reason that he went to such temple to pour out his soul in prayer. His interview with Zoshun, the famous Hoso scholar. When he had finished the 7 days of special prayer at Shoryoji, he went thence to Nara. Coming in the habit of a pilgrim, he had an interview with Zoshun Sozu, distinguished scholar of the Hoso sect, who later obtained the posthumous rank of Sojo, bishop. Seeing Honen on the veranda of the temple, Zoshun opened the door and invited him in, and they at once began conversation about the law, which lasted several hours. Honen asked him some questions about the doctrines of his sect, some of which he was not able to answer. When Honen would suggest explanations of his own, Zoshun was much surprised and exclaimed, "Surely this is no common man, but an incarnation of some mighty Buddha. Even though I should meet that great patriarch of our sect himself, I would verily not surpass this man. No words can describe the depth and breadth of his wisdom." So saying, he forthwith became Honen's disciple, and continued so all his life, never failing to bring him some present every year. Honen is reported to have said, "Such is every good scholar. When he is convinced that he has found one worthy of being his master, he should become his follower." Honen's visit to Zoshun, his interview with Kanka, the famous Shanron. At Daigo there was a distinguished scholar of the Sanron sect, Gonrishi Kwanga. Thither Honen wended his way, and opened his mind to Kwanga. The latter was simply speechless. He went into an inner chamber and brought out some books encased in 10 small boxes, saying, "I know of no one worthy of being my successor to transmit these doctrines of my sect to posterity. You have already fully entered into their profoundest depths. I therefore hand over to you these books with all our secret doctrines. With such words of extravagant panegyric, he passed them over to him. A priest called Aishobo, also known as Shishi Niudo, and several others who accompanied Honen were filled with wonder and awe on seeing and hearing these things. Honen on the doctrinal classification of the sects. It has always been the usage of each of the sects to classify the holy teachings of Buddha, this as comparatively profound as that as comparatively superficial, according to their several points of view, with all the sutras as grist for its own mill. The Tendai believes all the scriptures teach Tendai doctrines, the Kegon that they teach theirs, and so along with the Hasso and the Sanron, the scriptures are all equally their own. Honen's criticism of narrow sectarianism. Honen was reported to have said the scholars of the different sects fail to comprehend that every sect has its own peculiar standpoint, and so as soon as they discover anything contrary to their own, they at once pronounce such teaching false. This is quite unreasonable. So long as each sect has its distinctive features, they cannot be expected to be all alike, and it is a matter of course that each should have something against every other. 5. Honen, the founder of the Jodo sect. Honen's discovery of the scriptures. As Honen was well acquainted with the doctrines of the various sects of the Holy Path Shodo, all the learned men of the Hoso and Sanron, as well as of the Tendai and Kegon sects, spoke in the highest terms of his marvelous understanding and extensive scholarship. Nevertheless, he was still troubled about the way of attaining salvation and ill at ease. So with a view to the discovery of the path leading thereto immediately after death, he read the whole of the Buddhist scriptures through 5 times. He dwelt long and intently upon every trace he could find of what Shakya himself had taught during his lifetime, only to find one difficulty after another presenting itself to his mind. At last he found a book called Ojo Yoshu, written by Genshin, based upon a commentary by the Venerable Zendo on the Meditation Sutra. While perusing this book, it occurred to him to examine Zendo's commentary. He found that the writer earnestly inculcated the principle that by the practice of the Nembutsu, even the ordinary man, with all his hard distractions, may understand how he may be born into the Pure Land immediately at death, and thus the way of deliverance was made very easy. Honen proclaiming the new evangel. This leads to the founding of the sect. Though he had noticed it every time he turned over the pages of scriptures, he read this again 3 times with special attention and finally came to the following passage. Only repeat the name of Amida with all your heart. Whether walking or standing, sitting or lying, never cease the practice of it even for a moment. This is the very work which unfailingly issues in salvation, for it is in accordance with the original vow of that Buddha. Through this passage he was led to the conclusion that the common man, no matter how far removed from the age of the Buddha, may by the repetition of Amida's name, in virtue of that Buddha's original vow, of a certainty attain birth into the Pure Land. And so in the spring of the 5th year of Joan, 1175, when he was 43 years of age, he unhesitatingly abandoned all other forms of religious discipline and applied himself exclusively to the practice of the Nembutsu. Meditation compared with the Nembutsu. Honen once said, to attain birth into the Pure Land, there is nothing better than calling upon the Buddha's name. In reply to this, Jigembo urged the superiority of meditation on the Buddha. Then Honen defended his position by showing that the calling upon Amida's name was in accord with his original vow, but Jigembo insisted that his teacher, the deceased Ryonin Shonin, had held that meditation was better. To this Honen replied, he was indeed born before us, but even so, what difference does that make? At this, Jigembo became very angry, but Honen continued, according to Zendo, although the Buddha Shakya taught there was merit in the meditative and non-meditative good works. Yet if we inquire into the final purpose of Amitabha's original vow, we find that it was to lead all sentient beings to the one practice of calling upon his name, Nembutsu. Thus it is perfectly evident that the supreme place is given to the invoking of this Buddha, and all you need to do is to read the scriptures over carefully to find this out. Honen's Homes. Shortly after Honen began to devote himself exclusively to this one practice, he left his den in Kurodani on Mount Hay and removed to a place called Hirodani on the western mountain, and then after a little while, finding a quiet retreat in the neighborhood of Yoshimizu on the eastern mountain, he left Hirodani and settled there. When people visited him there, he explained the doctrines of the Jodo, Pure Land, and urged upon them the practice of the Nembutsu. His influence increased daily, and the numbers converted to his Nembutsu sect grew like the clouds in the sky. Though he changed his residence quite often, moving to the Kawaryana at Kamo to Kamatas to Komatsudono, the Kaichiro Temple in Otani, he never neglected his work of evangelism. His fame at length filled the court, and his influence spread throughout the land. This is due to the fact, I think, that the teaching of the Amida Buddha has a special affinity for our country, and that the cult of the Nembutsu is peculiarly adapted to these latter degenerate days when men have forsaken the law. Otani is the place where Honen lived, died, and was buried, and where the building called Miedo containing his relics now stands, evidencing by its small size of some 30 by 100 feet the simplicity in which he lived. Namo Amida Butsu. Honen's search for salvation. The promise of Amida Buddha. Namo Amitabha Buddha, Namo Amitabha. Honen once said, having a deep desire to obtain salvation, and with faith in the teachings of the various scriptures, I practice many salvation in forms of self-discipline. There are indeed many doctrines in Buddhism, but they may all be summed up in the three learnings, namely the precepts, meditation, and knowledge, as practiced by the adherents of the lesser and greater vehicles, and the exoteric and esoteric sects. But the fact is that I do not keep even one of the precepts, nor do I attain to any one of the many forms of meditation. A certain priest has said that without the observance of the Sila precepts, there is no such thing as the realization of samadhi. Moreover, the heart of the ordinary unenlightened man, because of his surroundings, is always liable to change, just like monkeys jumping from one branch to another. It is indeed in a state of confusion, easily moved and with difficulty controlled. In what way does right and indefectible knowledge arise? Without this sort of indefectible knowledge, how can one get free from the chains of evil passion, whence comes evil conduct? And unless one gets free from evil conduct and evil passions, how shall he obtain deliverance from the bondage of birth and death? Alas, what shall I do? What shall I do? The like of us are incompetent to practice the three disciplines of the precepts, meditation, and knowledge. And so I inquired of a great many learned men and priests whether there is any other way of salvation than these three disciplines that is better suited to our poor abilities, but I found none who could either teach me the way or even suggest it to me. At last I went into the library at Kurodani on Mount Hai, where all the scriptures were, all by myself, and with a heavy heart, read them all through. While doing so, I hit upon a passage in Zendo's commentary on the Meditation Sutra, which runs as follows. Whether walking or standing, sitting or lying, only repeat the name of Amida with all your heart. Never cease the practice of it even for a moment. This is the very work which unfailingly issues in salvation, for it is in accordance with the original vow of that Buddha. On reading this, I was impressed with the fact that even ignorant people like myself, by reverent meditation upon this passage and an entire dependence upon the truth in it, never forgetting the repetition of Amida's sacred name, may lay the foundation for that good karma with which, with absolute certainty, eventuate in birth into the blissful land. Honen's discussion with scholars at Ottara. Honen's reason for founding a sect. Honen once said, The reason I founded the Jodo sect was that I might show the ordinary man how to be born into the Buddha's real land of compensation. According to the Tendai sect, the ordinary man may be born into the so-called Pure Land, but that land is conceived of as a very inferior place. Although the Hasso sect conceives of it as indeed a very superior place, they do not allow that the common man can be born there at all, and all the sects, though differing in many points, all agree in not allowing that the common man can be born into the Buddha's land of real compensation. While according to Zendo's commentary, which laid the foundation of the Jodo sect, it was made clear that birth into that land is possible even for the common man. But many said to me, "You surely can promote the Nembutsu way of attaining Ojo without establishing a new sect. You are doing this merely out of ambition to appear superior to others." At first sight, this seems quite plausible, but on further reflection, it really misses the point. Unless I start a separate sect, the truth that the common man may be born into the Buddhist land of compensation will be obscured, and it will be hard to realize the deep meaning of Amida's original vow. I therefore, in accordance with the interpretation given by Zendo, unhesitatingly proclaim the doctrine of the land of real compensation. This is by no means a question of personal ambition. Honen's doctrine, a message to his age. Honen said to Shinja Kubo, a priest from the province of Harima, Suppose two imperial orders were sent out, one for the western and one for the eastern provinces. What would you think if the one intended for the western were by mistake taken to the eastern provinces, or vice versa? Would the people observe them? After some thought, Shinjakubo replied, "Even though they were imperial orders, how would it be possible for the people to observe them?" "Right you are," said Honen. "Now by the two imperial orders, I mean the teachings we inherit from Shaka, belonging to the so-called three periods, that of the perfect law, the imitation of the law, and the ending of the law. The practice of the so-called holy path, Shodo, belongs to the periods of the perfect law and its imitation, and is only attainable by men of superior capacity and wisdom. Let us call this the imperial order to the western provinces. The practice of the so-called Pure Land, Jodo, belongs to the degenerate age, when the law has fallen into decay, in which even the most worthless may find the way of salvation. Let us liken this to the imperial order to the eastern provinces. So it would never do to confuse these two paths, only one of which is suited to all three periods. I only discussed the doctrines of the holy path and of the Pure Land with several scholars at Ohara, and admitted that they both are equal and Buddhistic, just as both horns of an ox are equally his own. I went on to show that, from the standpoint of human capacity, my doctrine of the Pure Land is much superior, and has had by far the greater success. Though the holy path is indeed profound, it belongs to an age already past, and is not suited to men of the present day. And while the Pure Land seems shallow, it really is just the thing for our generation." When I thus won in the argument, the audience applauded, deeply convinced of the truth of the saying, "In the period of the latter days of the law, which lasts 10,000 years, all other sutras shall perish, but the one teaching of Amida alone shall remain to bless men and endure." His unceasing practice of the Nembutsu, from the time Honen began to repeat the name 70,000 times a day, he did nothing else day or night, and if anyone came to ask questions about religion, while he seemed to be listening to the questions, he lowered his voice, but really did not cease repeating the Nembutsu for a moment. Honen Shonen. Honen's teachings on the way of Jodo. 6. Things Honen was always saying, Part 1. The need of oral teaching. A man who reads about the doctrines of the Jodo without receiving oral instruction will miss the thing really necessary to the attainment of Ojo. Men of high station, such as Nagarjuna and Vasubandhu on the other hand, and on the other hand men of the lowest rank of common Latter-day sinners, guilty of the 10 evil deeds and the 5 deadly sins, used to be the object of the Buddha Shakya's exhortations to enter the land of perfect bliss. Now we common men of the lowest class, when we hear the Buddha exhorting good men, at once begin to depreciate ourselves, and to think that we cannot be born into the Pure Land, and so we actually, by our doubts, prevent ourselves from reaching that birth after death. The main thing, then, is that we clearly distinguish between the teaching intended for the good and that applicable to the evil, like ourselves. If we are so minded, our faith in the certainty of our own birth it will become assured, and through the power of the Buddha's original vow we shall accomplish our birth into that land at death. Simple invocation of the name. Namo Amitofo. There is no secret about calling upon the sacred name, except that we put our heart into the act, in the conviction that we shall be born into the land of perfect bliss. Save me, Amida Buddha. Amitofo. Namo Amitofo. We must not think that the expression Namo Amida Butsu means anything but simply, save me, O Amida Buddha. So then let us pray in our hearts, save me, O Amida, and say with our lips, Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amitofo. Namo Amitofo. The vilest may be saved, while believing that even a man guilty of the 10 evil deeds and the 5 deadly sins may be born into the Pure Land. Let us, as far as we are concerned, not commit even the smallest sins. If this is true of the wicked, how much more of the good? We ought to continue the practice of the Nembutsu uninterruptedly, in the belief that 10 repetitions or even 1 will not be in vain. If this is true of merely 1 repetition, how much more of many? Amida, Saishi, and Kanon. The Buddha flanked by the Bodhisattvas Kwanin and Saishi. Faith and works go hand in hand. If a man says he can be born by 10 repetitions of the sacred name, or even 1, and then begins to be careless about the practice, his faith will hinder his practice. On the other hand, if a man says, as Zendo did, that he unceasingly repeats the Nembutsu, but in his heart has doubts about the certainty of Ojo, in the case of one who only practices it once, then his practice will hinder his faith. So then, believe that you can attain Ojo by 1 repetition, and yet go on practicing it your whole life long. If you think there is uncertainty, Amitofo, as to the efficacy of calling upon the sacred name once, it means that there is doubt about it every time you call upon the sacred name. The Buddha's vow was to give birth into the Pure Land to those who would call upon his name even once, and so there is efficacy in every repetition of the sacred name. Invoke with heart and voice together. Do not be worrying about as to whether your evil passions are strong or otherwise, or whether your sins are light or heavy. Only invoke Amida's name with your lips, and let the conviction accompany the sound of your voice, that you will of a certainty be born into the Pure Land. Into the Pure Land. Nembutsu, the main thing. Even though you may be doing something else, let that be done while you go on with the main work of life, which consists in the practice of the Nembutsu, and do not let it be a sort of side work to anything else. It means Tofo, Namo Amitofo. It means hating the world, the countenance of a man who longs for paradise, and fixes his whole mind upon the one object of reaching it, will always appear as if he had a hatred and abhorrence of the world. Its peculiarity is no peculiarity. The peculiarity of the Nembutsu is absence of peculiarity, and the only thing is to believe the Buddha's words and practice the Nembutsu, and you will surely be born into the Pure Land. At mealtime, too. Sometimes a man dies from being choked by his food when taking a meal. Now I say, call upon the sacred name every time that you chew your food and swallow it. Nembutsu and the nature of things. We speak of the reason of things. For example, a flame of fire rises towards the sky. Water flows downwards. Some fruits are sour, others sweet. These are simple facts in the natural world. Now there is no doubt at all that we have facts equally in keeping with the nature of things. When we speak of the Buddha's vow, in which he took an oath to guide all simple sentient beings, who do nothing but earnestly call upon his name and welcome them into his paradise. Amida's great vow. When Zendo speaks of the all-comprehensive vow, as it is explained in the larger sutra, he means that by virtue of Amida's great vow, his meritorious karma, and his mighty power, all ordinary mortals, whether good or bad, may everyone attain birth into the Pure Land. An incapable man like me can only put his entire trust in the great vow. To fo Namo Amito Fo Namo Amito Fo saves even the foolish Honen. I am a man who wears no official headdress. I am nothing but the foolish Honen, weighed down by the 10 evils, and I see that the only way for me to attain Ojo is by calling upon the sacred name. The danger of learning. If one becomes a learned man, there is danger of his losing the disposition to practice the Nembutsu. Depend only on the Nembutsu. Amito Fo. Namo 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 Amito